So the real question on everyone's mind is mandatory vaccination possible? To answer this question, let's look at the government's own legislation. In 1946, the U.S. Public Health Service was established and Executive Order 9708 was signed, listing the communicable diseases where quarantines can be used. In 1946 and 2003, cholera, diphtheria, tuberculosis, typhoid, smallpox, yellow fever, and viral hemorrhagic fevers were added to the list. On April 4, 2003, Executive Order 13295 added SARS to the forced vaccination list. Then, on April 1, 2005, Executive Order 13295 added influenza caused by novel or re-emergent influenza viruses that are causing or have the potential to cause a pandemic. The President gave the Secretary of Health and Human Services the power to quarantine at his or her discretion. The Secretary of Health and Human Services now has the power to arrange for the apprehension and examination of persons reasonably thought to be infected. A cough or a fever could put a person at risk for being quarantined for an extended period of time without recourse. On January 28, 2003, Project BioShield was introduced during Bush's State of the Union address. This created permanent and indefinite funding authority to develop medical countermeasures. The National Institutes of Health was given the authority to speed approval of drugs and vaccines. Emergency approval of fast-tracked drugs and vaccines can now be given without the regular course of safety testing. On December 17, 2006, Division E, the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act, was created. This was added as an addendum to the Defense Appropriations Bill H.R. 2863 at 11:20 p.m. on a Saturday night, long after House committee members had signed off on the bill and gone home for the holidays. Under Section B, Paragraph 1, it states, "The Secretary of Health and Human Services can make a determination that a disease, health condition, or threat constitutes a public health emergency. He or she may then recommend the manufacture, testing, development, administration, or use of one or more covered countermeasures." A covered countermeasure is defined as a pandemic product, vaccine, or drug. This act also provides complete liability protection for all drugs, vaccines, or biological products deemed a covered countermeasure and used for an outbreak of any kind. Complete liability protection has been given to drug companies for any product used for any public health emergency declared by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Pharmaceutical corporations are now protected from all accountability unless criminal intent to do harm can be proven by the injured party. They are protected from liability even if they know the drug will be harmful to your health. You, however, have no protection or recourse at all from a government who stands to profit from forced mandatory vaccination.
If we've asked for U.S. attorneys' opinions, is it illegal to create a recreated, weaponized 1918 virus? Is what Taubenberger's team doing, is it illegal? They always respond, no, under the guidelines of the U.S. Department of Defense, it's not illegal at all. They have the rights and the abilities to do that. And it's not illegal to create a vaccine to fight against it. Just look at what happened in anthrax during the Gulf War. We supplied the anthrax to Iraq and Saddam Hussein, and so when we go in there, we have to get vaccines for all of our soldiers to protect against the weapon that we created for them. Okay, so it's not illegal to do all that. In fact, the military wants those vaccines to have in stockpile, so that's not illegal.
Now, shockingly, this isn't the only time that we can see in the U.S. Code where the government feels it has the right to poison, irradiate, and use humans as test subjects. Let's take a look at some of these in the U.S. Code. Let's look at Title 50, Chapter 32. Listed as the Chemical and Biological Warfare Program, we go to Section 1520A, where the government lists restrictions on use of human subjects for testing of chemical or biological agents. Part A reads Prohibited Activities. The Secretary of Defense may not conduct, directly or by contract, 1. Any test or experiment involving the use of a chemical agent or biological agent on a civilian population, or 2. Any other testing of a chemical agent or biological agent on human subjects. Well, that certainly sounds like a good thing until we read Part B. Under exceptions, it states, subject to subsections C, D, and E of this section, the prohibition in subsection A of this section does not apply to a test or experiment carried out for any of the following purposes. 1. Any peaceful purpose that is related to a medical, therapeutic, pharmaceutical, agricultural, industrial, or research activity. Remember, we're talking about humans like you and me here. 2. Any purpose that is directly related to protection against toxic chemicals or biological weapons and agents. And 3. Any law enforcement purpose, including any purpose related to riot control. Under Part C, it states, informed consent required, and this is very important. The Secretary of Defense may conduct a test or experiment described in subsection B of this section only if informed consent to the testing was obtained from each human subject in advance of the testing on that subject. Now, it is important to note here that your consent is always assumed in all of these experiments. The only way to protest this type of treatment, irradiation, and chemical exposure by your government is to verbally and in writing not consent. Again, consent is always assumed. And because you are fooled into voting for representatives, your consent is granted by Congress. Under Part D, prior notice to Congress, not later than 30 days after the date of final approval within the Department of Defense of plans for any experiment to study or be conducted by the Department of Defense, whether directly or under contract, involving the use of human subjects for the testing of a chemical agent or biological agent, the Secretary of Defense shall submit to the Committee on Armed Services of the Senate and the Committee on Armed Services of the House of Representatives a report stating forth a full accounting of those plans, and the experiment or study may then be conducted only after the end of the 30-day period, beginning on the date such report is received by those committees. Again, your consent to be tested on is being granted by your congressmen and your senators, and generally with the full knowledge and comprehension of the governor of your state. In Part E, the U.S. Code actually defines what a biological agent is. In this section, the term biological agent means any microorganism, including bacteria, viruses like the flu virus, fungi, rickettsia, or protozoa, pathogen or infectious substance, and any naturally occurring bioengineered or synthesized component of any such microorganism, pathogen or infectious substance, whatever its origin or method of production, like the re-engineered, recombined flu virus, that is capable of causing death, disease, or other biological malfunction in a human, an animal, a plant, or another living organism. Deterioration of food, water, equipment, supplies, or materials of any kind, or deleterious alteration of the environment. So the government just gave its permission to kill, disease, or make to malfunction the human, animal, plant, or other living organism's body. They've given their permission to deteriorate our food, water, equipment, supplies, and materials of any kind, and they've given their permission to alter our environment. This is your government. And these are the same people who want to vaccinate you and passing laws to force vaccinate you and your children.